going about demoing things on a little more complex development in Flow Designer. So that's what we're covering today is Flow Designer basics. This is actually intermediate level, more than basics. We're going to be going over developing the custom script actions and how to utilize them, how things can be flowed through them. You'll have you can have a variety of objects input, and you can have stuff move through the entire flow. And then what we're going to do is take it to the next level. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that I use as best practices inside of Flow Designer development. And I hinted at them in the last session, part 3, and this one we'll be going very much deeper into it. I'll be giving away a library that me and my partner in crime, Keith Mills, are presenting as a CreatorCon. I've got a bit of that library that I'm utilizing in this. So be sure to catch that. It's a free session that will be given out. It's Scoped Application Development is the name of that particular CreatorCon. So advanced scoped application development. All right, this is me. For those of you who never watched one of my videos before, I am certified instructor. I'm also a senior or principal architect, ServiceNow architect inside of Accenture, and an MVP community for the last 5 years. All right, so what are we doing? All right, we're going to create custom script actions. Oh boy, we're actually going to create 3 of them. And they're going to tap into some really nice functionality of the platform. We're going to peel back a little bit of the scripting API side of things and how we can suck that into the Flow Designer world. So like I said, this is more intermediate level, and it does presuppose that you've got scripting in your back pocket. Although what I'm going to show you, I'll be giving everything I show you to you when we release the PowerPoint from this session. And then also I'll be, of course, releasing all the objects and everything else that we construct. And so I'm going to be going into passing information around between custom script actions. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about their limitations, and they've got some very tight tolerances, what is allowed and how it's actually manipulated. And I was bumping into one of those and trying to figure my way around, and after 25 or 30 different tests, I finally got it to work. And that's how tight some of these things are. They are somewhat difficult at times to discover exactly what's going on. So even the logging in Orlando is still not where it needs to be in order to tell you what is happening to you. So I'll be talking a little bit about that as we go into it. I'm going to be demonstrating a best practice of using script includes. And like I said, I created a giveaway library of functionality that you will find interesting and somewhat useful. I hope very useful. I've published all of these things before in various articles out there. We'll be reusing that functionality, and it's got extra quotes and or comments and stuff inside of it so that you can go chase down those articles if you're interested in digging out the full content and what I actually did with those script includes. All right, and then we might get to this last one, which is the fixed script to call everything. I think we will, so we'll see what happens here. All right, so moving right along. So this is a review from the last session. This is essentially what we end up doing. So I'll be walking these steps through again, but I'll be getting more and more complex as we go along. So we're going to be creating a blank script action. This actually 3 of them. The first one we're going to be doing is going to be taking a JSON string and converting it into a JSON. Then manipulating the object further in. So we have to define the inputs to that script action, and then we'll plunk the script down in. This define the outputs is actually needs to be stuffed all the way down here a ways. So I'll be walking through these things a little more in detail. We create the script using the inputs and outputs, and then define the outputs, and then we are able to utilize this thing. So you test the script action in place, then you plunk it down into your script, and then you test the whole, or I should say your flow, and then you test the whole flow. So this is roughly the process. I usually invert a couple of these. Now, to define the output side, there's a trick to it. It's a little interesting. I understand the reasoning behind it, and I'll get to that when we get there. It's it's a little interesting. Anyway, we'll move on. All right, so we'll also be doing, if we can get to it at the end of this session, executing from a fixed script. And I'll be pulling that in and then demonstrating how to push data through our new flow design flow that we'll be constructing in this session. So, all right, so let's go straight to the demo. And first off, we want to get Flow Designer up. So let's do Flow Designer. Give me just a second. Okay, I'm going to use subflows. I like subflows for what we're doing because a subflow actually allows you to pass in anything you want to. A flow only allows you to pass in a record, a glide record. So it's actually associated to the table. You have no other parameters that you can force into it. Subflows are the most flexible of the models. They allow you to fire from any script. Can be a script include, fixed script, any server-side script can fire it. I considered using a UI action to push a button to send information across. But if you've got a UI action, it's usually associated to a table, and therefore, why bother? You've got some other record action you can do and just have it react on that in the flow. So I decided instead to go with a model that worked from another script include, or from a fixed script, or from a scheduled job, where you're passing the information in and it isn't hooked to a record or a table. So we're going to create a brand new subflow. And I want to make sure that it is global application. I can create a category and have it associated into that category. I'm going to leave it as global, which is the default. Put something in here, testing of various custom script actions. There. And let's see, anything else I need, like a name maybe? And I wonder why it keeps throwing my wife's name in there. I guess name field, I don't know, weird stuff. And we'll call this thing custom action. I can't spell. Okay, good enough. So custom action tester. And then we hit submit. That's really all the information it needs. Okay, so inputs. Well, in this particular demo, we're going to be inputting a JSON string. So we're going to be submitting a JSON string from some external source and running it into our flow. So, and this is the beauty of a subflow. It allows you to define your inputs and outputs and be able to do a variety of things. Whereas in a flow designer flow, you're stuck with a table or the service catalog type thing. By the way, on the service catalog side, with the release of Orlando, it is now no longer necessary to go out and activate the Flow Designer plugin for service catalog. It is automatically activated now. So it's out of the box activated with Orlando, which is great. So, okay, we're going to call this thing JSON input. It'll be a string, and that's all there is to it. So our entire input is going to be in through a JSON stringified object. All right, so that's done. All right, next we're going to save that and move to creating our action. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at a new object, new action object, and we're going to call it, translate JSON or string. Change JSON. I like that. Okay, so we're going to be translating a JSON stringified object into JSON itself. I'm not going to do anything here. This is going to remain as application global. Convert a JSON stringified object to a JSON object. Okay, submit. All right, so our input is going to be a JSON, stringified, so just a string, and we'll call it JSON object. Nice and original. And it's going to be a string, right? So we're all happy about that. All right, so that looks good. All right, next, we're going to actually add a step. Now, this has, I've got Integration Hub installed on my instance. This is my personal developer instance. Script is not part of Integration Hub. It comes bundled as of, I believe it was New York. They started adding this in as part of the baseline installation. So you have this with, if you are upgraded in at least New York. Anyway, we're going to pick that. Wow. And now here's where it gets interesting. Notice this is an action outline. Actions can contain one or more steps. So this could actually have a whole bunch of different steps in it. We're only going to have one because we're going to be doing a couple of things. We're basically creating a converter, and we're going to be translating a string into a JSON object. And therefore, we're just going to have a single step. We're not going to do anything else. And each step has an input and an output section. And you can see that here, input and output, and then a scripting section in the center. So that's all there is to it. I mean, it is pretty straightforward, but we still got to feed this input into the script step. If you don't do that, it doesn't have anything to work with. And the same goes for whenever you want to output something from that step. You've got to put an output variable in place for this output to actually function. That's why I said I'll define this last. So in the script step, we're going to be doing nothing more than feeding into the script the variable JSON object. So we'll call it JSON object. And we'll drag the pill over here and drop it in. Boom. So now this takes the input to the overall script action and feeds it to the script step. Now, like I said, this step can have input and output, and there can be another input or another step with inputs and outputs, and then finally you have something you're throwing back out through the outputs. But in our case, we've got a single step in here, so we're just doing one thing. Now we got to consume this. So we're going to create a script in here to actually do the conversion. Okay, keep your fingers crossed. This is where I was running into trouble earlier. So I'm going to take the input object and I'm going to convert it into JSON. And I'm going to create a variable to do this. It isn't really necessary. You could feed it directly into the output, but I'm going to do this anyway. So I'm going to call it converter and equals, and we're going to say JSON.parse. And now, in order to address this thing, it's called an inputs. So that's really kind of hard to understand when it doesn't say it anywhere. It says input singular up there. There's nothing here, nothing here. You just got to know this is what it is, I guess. I found out because I looked at various examples, inputs. So dot. Now, it doesn't know about the object up here because I haven't saved yet. If I had saved first, let's see if that makes a liar out of me here. If I save up here, then it should know about that object and include it as part of the information in inputs. And it doesn't. So anyway, this will take, and I want to make sure it's stringified. Now remember, toString does not work inside of Flow Designer. Not that I've found. plus tick tick, and if it's part of a glide record, you can do a get value. I just use plus tick tick for grins and giggles, but I've had a lot of trouble with toString workflows and Flow Designer, and I bumped into it in another place recently. I can't remember where it was, where toString didn't work. So always fall back on the old convert it to a string using plus tick tick. And this is as fast as toString, and it is used everywhere inside of the platform. But toString is problematic, and I don't know why. All right, so we're converting this to, this string that's coming in to a JSON object and stuffing it into converter. And now we come down here and we have to create a variable to contain that. So the output is going to be, let's call it converter. Something better to say. And this is going to be JSON. All right, so now we got to put something in it. Now that's going to be called outputs plural dot converter equals converter. I could have said parsed JSON. Let's say that parsed JSON rather than getting confused over naming conventions here. All right. So we're taking, like I said, I could probably just drop this straight into here, but I might want to do something like a GS. And all of your API is available here, by the way. And we'll call it parsed. No, we won't. We won't do that. We'll have to, let's call it JSON and do a stringify of it. So it's a little primitive here. Notice you don't have any of your scripting tools across the top. And you notice that in some cases, it doesn't know about the input and output variables, for example. In some cases, it doesn't know about certain objects. You don't have an object lookup tool. There's nothing here really that's complex. So it's kind of primitive still, and it's been this way since it released, but this is an extremely powerful tool. So don't let it daunt you if you've got to fall back on, stuff from 5 years ago or better. So we'll save. All right, so we're going to test this, but it's not done. So I got to have an output still. I don't have any output. So the script step actually does an output, but the whole custom action does not. And I want that information from this variable. So I've got to build one. It's going to be JSON. Notice I'm in an editor, and I have to edit this particular variable to do anything to it. We'll call this converter, just to stay on top of things with label. Now notice in this particular case too, a lot of times whenever you type in a label, it will give you a variable name based on it. Then not everywhere does that yet. Not sure why. It's also got problems with the testing side. On an overall flow, the tester remembers your string or wherever it is you're typing in the script action testers or any sort of action tester, it forgets after every run. So, I mean, I can get out, get back in on the flow, and it remembers. If I get out and get back into the test on a script action, it forgets. All right, so now I've got this. I've got to exit the mode in order to put something in it. Isn't that interesting? So I can edit the outputs and modify the names and the type. I have to exit the mode in order to give it a value. So we'll drag the pill over from the script step, and now we're done. So now I want to see if this actually works. And this is where the beauty of this tool comes in. I have to save. I don't have to publish yet, but I have to save. It's just a good idea anyway. Now I can test. Now this thing's going to take a string, which is just a JSON string, and I'm going to drop that in. And by the way, JSON requires double quotes and a colon to be parsed properly. So if I'm dropping a string in, it's got to be properly set up. Single ticks don't work. Tried it, didn't work. All right, this is what I'm talking about in the test. In the flow testing, it works great. So when it says test flow, it remembers whatever you type in here between sessions. So after I run a test and then I get out of this by closing it out, when I come back in on a test action, I have to re-put this in again. It's annoying as heck. In the flow side, it remembers between test runs. So let's go. All right, so theoretically it worked. We should have an input that looks very similar to the output. Here's our input. Here's our actual transliteration of the output. We can go and look at the steps, and we have a single step with an input of the value and an output of JSON. Isn't that pretty? And this is the one that blew up on me and was blowing up on me and was blowing up on me. So I'm happy to see it actually function. Well, we're not done. I actually want to see one other thing. Let me get that. So back here, we go to the actual logs. And let's see if we got it. Yes, hello world. So it did JSON parse it. Looks great. So step one is done. All right, here's what I'm talking about. If I cancel out and I go back into test, blank. You'll see that it remembers between sessions like this when you're actually in the flow. So we're going to go back over to our custom action tester and drop our brand new action in. Now, this action appears under global, and you can move it into one of these others by specifying which area you want it actually to store it in. The system remembers, and you can go from there. So I didn't publish it, and you'll notice it's missing off the list here. So I've got to publish first before I can actually use it. Any future modifications to this, I have to walk through the same process. I have to save and then publish in order to get it to actually take effect in my new flow. So now if we go over here and we go to global, we have translate JSON. Now it takes a single JSON string. So I'm going to take that input and drop it here. And by the way, it's pretty sensitive on how, when you're dragging across, you can see the not symbol. And when it turns to a plus, it's ready to drop. If you're over here, if you don't hit it just right, it doesn't do it. You've got to watch until it turns to a plus and you see the actual cursor sitting there in the field. Then it will take the pill. All right. So now we should be set. I'm going to save this just for grins and giggles. Here it isn't necessary to save, but we'll do it anyway. And I'll test, and I'll drop my nice little string in there, and we'll hit run. And let's see if it worked. And it did. It converted it to the JSON. So inside of our flow, it worked. And it's good to test one of these. Now, this is very simplistic. I'm walking you through everything, just, baby stepping you through the system. All right, so that's all fine and good. Let's cancel, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. See, it remembers just as much as you want, but in the script action, it does not. So there's a slight defect there that's still in there, but the fact that it remembers this on the flow designer side, big thumbs up. That's new. I hadn't seen that before. All right, so, and now I'm spoiled with it, and I get aggravated with the script action. All right, so the next one we want to put together is going to actually do something with it, right? We want to go to the way, what way can we actually expand this object? We can add things to it and whatever. So we're going to create a thing that adds to the JSON. So we'll create a new action. We'll call it add to JSON. And again, add a value to the to a JSON object. Again, application of global and submit. Okay, so this is our new add to JSON. Our input will be a JSON object. Actually, see, it auto names the variable there. It's really picky on where it does all this stuff. This time it's a JSON, and now we'll add a script step in, and we'll call this add value to object. Okay, so here we're going to again put in, the JSON object, and it's going to be this guy right here. And again, you want it to be a, in order to get it to take, it has to be a plus. See how close you can get and still not get it if you're not careful. It's funny because I'll get in a hurry and I'll be dragging stuff over, and it's, I think I've actually done the deed, but unless I see this and verify it's there, it hasn't. All right, so next step is to actually add something to the JSON object itself. This actually isn't as hard as it sounds. It's got a, I mean, we're going to have to pass it a name value type thing. So we've got a couple more things to add to this. First one is going to be the name, because everything's name value, right? So name, and that means, notice I don't have name. I have to go back up here to this inputs and pass it in, right? So create name. It's going to be a string, create value. And I'm going to make this a string. You can turn it into an object and do all sorts of crazy stuff here, but we're just looking for a key value pair. If I'm going to be passing in another JSON object, I can JSON stringify it, whatever. So now I go back to here. I've got a name, and I can drop it down here. And then I'm going to use a string, value, and we'll pass it down here. All right, so special effects are included for free. Next, we want to take this and we want to, just add stuff to it, right? So let's var, call it JSON object to reuse a value. And in this particular case, we're going to actually be looking at it as an output value. So we'll call it output JSON. I like that better. Ooh, much better. All right. I'm easily pleased. Variable names are important, right? Okay. So the next thing is we want to, double check what's coming in, make sure there's actually something there. And therefore we want to, look it over as it's coming in, make sure it really is a JSON object. So this is inputs dot out let me grab this name, JSON object. Make sure it's a value, inputs dot, and make sure it's not a blank object. If it is a blank object, then we'll do something else with it. And I'll show you what that something else here in a second is. This is a neat model you can use. Tried it out doing various things. I've got it in a lot of code now. This particular model is extremely useful. So now output JSON will start out life as JSON object, or inputs.json object. So there you go. And with this is initializing this value. So we start out initializing it this, and we end up initializing it, reinitializing it as that. If it's blank, then you're adding the first key value pair to it. So now we're going to pretend it's one or the other. Now, you worthless thing. See, this is another problem with you got to watch it. You can't fast type because it'll start dropping values in for you automatically. It's another one of those make you crazy things. All right, var, and then name equals inputs, and I probably should reverse these and see. Yeah, anyway, name. And there it saw it at the last second. So sometimes that value placement stuff doesn't always pick off of what's up here. I've found it to be very inconsistent, so I don't trust it. Okay, and we'll have to create an output. Our output's going to be a JSON, right? So our JSON object for output, actually that's the label, so JSON object. And let's see here, that's good enough for that, and this is going to be JSON. All right, and then our outputs are going to be JSON again. Rats. That, and edit, and pull this guy over here. Now, let's double check our code. We got one line missing here, and it's going to be outputs.json object equals, and it's going to be the output JSON. Now, we're missing something. That's actually assigning the new value, key value pair, to the JSON object that got passed in. So there's the magic. So output JSON, remember we initialized it to be the inbound variable, is going to be name. You can't dot it. You probably could. This is a little safer. You could probably do an output JSON because it's an object, right? So you can add things to the object. So it could probably be output JSON.name, and it would initialize it. And then you want the value. Now, the reason I did this is to allow me to print these off if I wanted to. In reality, you could probably just put inputs.name right here and inputs.value right here and get away with it just fine. That's it. So now I've just added a value to the object and I'm passing it back out. Now there's a couple interesting things on this. So on this output value right here, this final JSON that's outputted, the system, the flow system, does not know what all of the components are underneath this object. It knows it's JSON, but you have no way of drilling down and grabbing individual pieces out of it and dropping just those individual pieces into objects over here. So there's no understanding by Flow Designer, the editor, that this is actually an expandable object. And this is a big deal to me. Inside of, this is one of the parity problems between Flow Designer and workflows. In workflows, we have the full object available to us and we can add it in anywhere we want to. And it can be dropped in anywhere we want to. Here, not so much. As you can see, I can't get at the bits through the pill system. So everything that's in here is actually not visible to me. Even after I go into a script action, I have to know where everything is. So this is more or less one of those things where I'm feeling my way through and I have to have a good understanding of the objects I'm passing around in order to make use of them inside of my activity or actions. And that's painful. It just is the way of life though right now inside of Flow Designer. So someday we may get this maybe in Paris where we can expand an object and pull the bits out of the object for our use. But right now it does not do that. It works fine for glide records and for things, that are ServiceNow understood. In other words, the system understands what the object is when it's inside of the Flow Designer environment, but you create them and it doesn't know. It flat out doesn't know. If I pass in a JSON object, it does not know. It just looks at it as JSON. So it's no way to break this apart on the pill side. You have to do it inside of a custom action. All right, so I'm going to close the translator out because we know that guy works. And this add to JSON is our biggie right now. And so I think I got all of my bits. I'm going to save. And I'm going to do something a little different on the testing side. Rather than testing right here, which is never fun, I'm going to go back here and add it in and then add a logging step after it. How are we doing on time? Still pretty good. Okay, global. All right, so did I publish? No, poof. Always publish. You think after working with this since Kingston, I would have this down pat, and it's still forget to publish. All right, so global. And we have add to Json here at the top. Beautiful. All right, so we're going to pull this in, this converter that we're passing out from the translate. And now we have a new key value pair that we're going to add in. In this particular case, I'm going to throw one in called location, and I'm going to make this available to my object so that it's available to other things downstream. And I'm going to say this is going to be FD colon, it's a string. Remember, we defined it that way inside of our add to JSON. And I'm going to call this my custom action tester. And that way I can pass this value in, and this becomes part of my object. That's the theory. So we'll see. Now remember, we can't tell what's going on because we don't know what's in here. And this is part of the problem, as I can expand this object further down. And if the pill system were smarter, it would allow me then to see what new components have been added or new properties have been added to my object, but it doesn't. It does not know about it. All right, so we're done. I'm going to go ahead and save. Okay, now I'm going to add a logging. I'm going to show you a little trick in logging that I think you're going to find most interesting if you haven't ever done this before. So in here, I can do an info log. See this formula here? I'm going to go into that. And I'm going to totally do something different here. I'm going to create a variable called location. Now, even though we added location to our object, this is a problem. I can't drag these objects out here. See? I can't use them in this script. That's a big deal to me. It's another one of those, gee, I wish, but we don't have that available. But you have quite a bit of coding capability here. This is more or less the poor man's script action, and you have this available wherever there's an FX, so the formula capability. I can put quite a bit of stuff here. It has to return a value, return a string value. So I'm going to create a function called log, and I'm going to say test of logging, and I'm going to pass in the location. And this is going to give you a kind of feel for where we're going with some of our script includes a little bit later on here. And if I don't finish today, that'll give me another session. All right, so got our function, has to return a value. And I'm going to do something a little fancy schmancy here. I'm going to return a millisecond value. There's your milliseconds at current time. And I could do much more fancy stuff than this. This is just kind of cobbled together. And then the location that got passed in. And then on the next line, I'll put my actual message. I've done this sort of stuff. I've got all sorts of loggers that I've created and published about. And this is one of the better ideas that I think I've come up with. It helps me do millisecond sorting, and I'll show you what that's about. Plus, it pegs the location in, and at the same time, you're using basically what boils down to GS info here. So it's all you're doing is you're allowing a capability to sort by millisecond value inside of the system log, which it doesn't allow you to do right now. All right, so we're done. I'm going to close that, and we used an out-of-the-box function to log things out. It's not doing any logging here, but it is giving us, I wanted to show off that function capability. This is kind of cool. I mean, you can do quite a bit here. You can call into script includes, you can do all sorts of functions, you can create all sorts of stuff right here. I could have even embedded this as an, just an embedded function. I could have gotten rid of, quite a bit here. But it gives you a huge amount of flexibility, even with out of the box actions. Now, the only thing it's missing though is the ability to drag a pill over into this and make use of it. That would be very nice if you could do that. I would find that exceedingly useful. Instead, what you have to do is create your own script action to play that game. All right, so I think we're ready to test. I'm going to save. Got one more action we're going to be creating after this. So I think we're sitting pretty on time still. All right, so now we test. Now remember, it's going to remember our test from last time. And this is the thing I really wish we had. Anyway, I won't go into that. All right, running. So again, the ability to test inside of the Flow Designer platform is really useful, really nice. Okay, so it looks like we completed all the way through. Our log should have logged this out. It looks like it did a nice job. Put the millisecond in there. If we have our actual system logs, which I seem to have closed the window. There it is. System logs, and check it here. Make sure it actually did what it was supposed to do. And it did. JSON null is not good. So something's blanking our JSON output. But we got the hello world from our script include, or I mean our script action, our first one. But on the second one, it bombed. So let's go find out what's going on. You know what? I'm going to move this up here because that's all right. So add to JSON. Okay, so it came in. It was supposed to add, but I don't see any information on what it had when it came in. It looks like it didn't have the information. So I probably got a variable goofed up someplace. So there's no input value and obviously then no output value, although there should have been if it were a blank. But something got eaten and it didn't throw an error. Isn't that interesting? So our translator worked. If we go up here, you'll actually see the steps. So converter didn't end up with the value either. Gotta love it. Okay, so originally this worked. So let's go back to the translate and take a look at it. It shouldn't have changed at all, right? So it actually worked when it hit this. The parse JSON should have gone to the value and converter. The output should have gone to the converter. So this output variable should have had this, and it does. So all of that should have worked okay. Let's test this again. Again, it doesn't remember. Gotta quit randomly hitting buttons here. Run the test, make sure it's okay. See, now it's returning values where it didn't in the last one. Okay, go back to the custom action. Tester. We know this worked because we tested it earlier before we added this. Now we're adding this. We're pulling from the converter, which is an actual JSON object, and we're running it in, and it should have worked just fine. Okay. Another one of those where it's not functioning like it's supposed to function. So we have everything that's supposed to be there and it's not working. Well, let's go test our add to JSON. Let's see if it'll actually take the object. Now I've had the tester fight me on this before. So if I hit test and I drop this in and I say FD, or I should say location, it's FD colon, you know, custom action. And let's hit run and see if it actually works. I had it fight me on this stuff before, so we'll see. Yeah, see, it didn't get any of the values, nothing came in. All right, so I'm missing something. Let's make sure I've got inputs, they're there. These feed off of those three inputs. We have inputs.name, inputs.value. I can do a gs.info right here. It's almost acting like this is broken somehow. Tell you what, I'm going to cut the, no, should be fine. JSON object, JSON object, JSON object. Let's do a string of 5 inputs. Another one of those days. Let's make sure what's coming in is really there. And then we'll know if name is there, value's there, and if the actual object is sitting there. Because these are all acting blank right now, which is saying to me that something bizarre is going on, because the inputs right here should handle it just fine. So we have JSON, object, string, and string. At the very least, we should have population of all this stuff. And it's not throwing an error. It's just eating everything, and it's not coming in here. This is what I was talking about. It worked before I started the session, and now it's not working. Okay, so let's go on this again. And then we'll just call it test subject. And run. See, string and string. All right, let's take a look at the log. And see, it's definitely there. So we got a disconnect. And this is what I was talking about, that you'll run into are these real finicky little disconnects like this, where the object's coming in just fine, and inputs is actually there, and it's it's got everything you need. But when you set stuff up and you try to get at it, then it gets all kind of wonky on the output. So let me stare at this for just a second. See if I can figure this out. Here's part one that's a problem. So that I did that, and that may be all of it. All right, so let's go out here, save, test. Nope, I lost my string, doesn't remember. And run the test. How are we doing? We got 11 minutes left. It's good stuff. You actually get to see how finicky this can be. Okay, there, it suddenly has that, but notice the string was blank still. So the input and the output objects, it's just reflecting it back out the door. All right, let's find out why. And yes, I do fight this kind of stuff quite often in this, especially when you're doing your own custom stuff. So name and value is actually name and value here. Let's go ahead and print those off. And they aren't reserved words, so I don't have to worry about that either. There you go, that should work. We could stringify this. And now we'll get to see. The reason I do this is because sometimes the tester doesn't log things like you think it's going to. And I go ahead and throw the extra ones in here to make absolutely sure that I've got the values I think I got. And so that's why I'm double tapping here. I'm actually going in, doing the GS info into my logs, and then also I've got the tester that is recording the information for me. So everything here should function, according to the values coming in, and the Y4 of it, I don't know. I'm going to do one extra thing on these. I didn't have to do this on my original testing, but I'm going to freeze these little things to make sure they're strings. Sometimes that fixes this. So as you've seen in other sessions I've been doing. And grind my teeth because it doesn't remember. Okay, and let's see if it works. It did not. And notice it didn't show anything up for the names. So there's something going on with that. Let's see here. See the inbounds, and it wouldn't have this as an outbound if it didn't know about it on the inbound, but on the inbound, notice it's missing. So it's really interesting how that's occurring. Okay, so one other place I'm going to check is here. So yeah, so the output and the input is really interesting here. So I have my value as Steve, but the name value is not there. So that's why it's not adding it in. The name is blank. Now notice this value is there, but when I looked at the actual run for this, it wasn't. So there's something going on with the name. Okay, we got name, string. Its name is here. I even had to delete these things all the way through because it got confused somehow. I pulled this name down. Let's do it again. Dropped it here. We toString it here. It's inputs.name, and it's definitely there because when we stringify, it's there. When we put this in, it's blank. So let's do this. Let's call it name1 and value1. And I've never had to do this before, so this is very interesting. And save and test. And this has to work. If it doesn't work, I'll post my code later, and with everything like I said, and you'll see it how it's supposed to be. And I'll work this out and I'll publish what's wrong. All right, so that's the problem when you go into a little bit more complex demos like this. So let's call it cast away. See, no values in this. So weird. And no reflection back here. And it did pick up the name and the value this time, but it did not add it in. And I'm wondering if there's something going on with the JSON itself. So you actually see the value and the name. Ah, that may be the whole problem. So inputs is value 1 and name 1, and I didn't reflect that up here. So this one, last try, last one. Okay, add, cancel. I didn't do it down here. I did it here. I didn't do it here. So what it was actually printing off is a mystery. Now, this is going to be the value of this. Nah, should have worked. Starting to second guess myself here. So these right here are not listing in. Let's go ahead and change them all. And save it down and save. And I didn't have to do any of this stuff when I was creating this the first time. It all worked like a champ. All right, test it. And again, you know, in theory, everything here should work. See no values. This just really boggles the imagination right here. And in here, we're probably okay. Yeah, test guy, and nothing. All right, well, we're pretty much out of time. I'm going to detail review this after our session is over here and publish out what my findings are. I've got my inputs, got my outputs, but it is just rejecting the whole thing here. So output JSON object, name 1, value 1, name 1, value 1. And when we stringify to here, this didn't work because why, I'm not sure. These are there. And you have to do it this way because it's the actual value of the name. But when I went to print the output JSON here, it didn't have it. These are definitely stringified, so everything should have been fine. Again, I'll test it out, see why, see if I can figure out, you know, what's going on here and why it's not updating this properly. This right here should have been equal to our input JSON, then with the new value. Okay, and I've got one other action which I'll give to you guys after this session is over with too, for logging the object using the script include that I was going to hand over here and demonstrate. All right, so despite the wonkiness of this, we've got, let's see here, go back. In essence, we were supposed to go over all the script include libraries and take away with it. I will be giving you that and publishing all out when I get the demo to work correctly. And then don't forget there are several resources out there. The microcertifications are going through a series of updates right now. This one's still valid, and it'd be a good idea to go out and get your microcertification in Flow Designer. This is excellent, hands-on, free, and there's a lot of really great material there. I've also got several articles out that you might be interested in with various aspects of scripting. And then the developer site where I've derived some of the information for this session from is out here. It's a Madrid one, but it's still relevant. Okay, any questions? I know we're down to a minute or so here.
I haven't seen any questions come through yet. I'll just do one more quick check on the YouTube channel. Nothing there yet.
I've had demos blow up before, but not quite to this extent.
Well, that's okay. Are your slides going to be available on the community link?
Yes. So we'll be posting all the code and the the entire flow, and then anything else, like the script include and everything that goes with it.
Right. And of
And
course,
then the presentation itself too.
perfect. And then anyone can also rewatch it. The video recording is going to be on that community link. And you can always welcome to post questions later for Stephen to come back and answer. Okay, and with that, we want to thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to having you on the community.
Thank you, everybody.